When news broke that Napheesa Collier had officially canceled her meeting with WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, the league was thrown into chaos. What was meant to be a quiet, behind-the-scenes attempt to patch things up between one of the WNBA's brightest stars and its top executive turned into a public implosion that shook the foundation of the league. Collier's decision wasn't just a scheduling change, it was a declaration. The message was clear: enough was enough. For weeks, tension had been building between players and league leadership. Whispers of dissatisfaction had grown louder after Collier's exit interview, where she accused the commissioner of being out of touch with the athletes she's supposed to represent. According to Collier, Engelbert wasn't supporting fair negotiations. Instead, she was busy counting Caitlin Clark's pockets, a comment that quickly became a rallying cry among frustrated players and fans alike. Engelbert's leadership was starting to look less like guidance and more like control, and the players were done being polite about it. The situation exploded when Collier decided to cancel the meeting entirely. Insiders said the relationship between her and Engelbert was beyond repair. What had been planned as a private sit-down to clear the air suddenly turned into the spark that ignited an all-out revolt. When a respected veteran like Collier refuses to meet with the commissioner, it's not just a disagreement, it's a power shift. Behind closed doors, Engelbert was reportedly blindsided. She had hoped to use the meeting to smooth things over, maybe even stage a few photos showing unity. But when Collier canceled, that narrative shattered. To make matters worse, Engelbert went on record during a pre-finals press conference, publicly denying that she had ever made the controversial remarks about player gratitude and compensation that Collier accused her of. The denial came across as cold and calculated, a corporate move meant to save face rather than mend relationships, and that's where everything went wrong. Collier saw Engelbert's public statement as an insult, a public dismissal of her integrity. Instead of addressing the issue privately, the commissioner had chosen to defend herself on the biggest stage of the season, just days before the WNBA Finals. Within hours of that press conference, our stand with Napheesa began trending across social media. Fans demanded accountability. Players quietly began liking and reposting Collier's interviews. The league that had prided itself on unity was now divided. The athletes on one side, the commissioner on the other. For Engelbert, the backlash was immediate and brutal. She denied making the so-called "grateful for your platform" comment, insisting the reports were inaccurate. But fans weren't buying it. The timing, the tone, and the body language all betrayed a deeper problem. She wasn't speaking as a leader taking responsibility. She was speaking like a CEO protecting her image. Analysts pointed out how defensive she looked. Former players accused her of gaslighting. Commentators described her as tone-deaf and robotic. And in the middle of the biggest week of the WNBA season, the spotlight wasn't on the championship. It was on the commissioner's credibility. Napheesa Collier's silence after canceling the meeting spoke louder than any statement could. Her refusal to engage wasn't petty. It was strategic. She wasn't going to sit across from someone who dismissed her concerns in public. She wasn't going to be used for damage control. Her decision was a stand against years of ignored player feedback, broken promises, and performative leadership. For many players watching, Collier wasn't just representing herself anymore. She was representing every woman in the league who had been told to be grateful and stay quiet. Then came the shockwave. Caitlin Clark spoke out. The rookie phenom, who'd quickly become the face of the WNBA, didn't stay silent. In an interview, Clark acknowledged that Collier made valid points about how the league treats its players. Coming from Clark, the player driving record ratings, ticket sales, and merchandise numbers, that statement carried enormous weight. It wasn't just solidarity. It was a declaration that the next generation of stars was paying attention. Suddenly, this wasn't just about Collier versus Engelbert. It was about players versus power. Clark's support legitimized the movement. The narrative shifted from a player dispute to a full-blown crisis of leadership. Fans rallied around the athletes, flooding comment sections with demands for Engelbert's resignation. Prominent journalists questioned whether she could survive this politically. And as the finals continued, reporters asked players more about the controversy than the games themselves. Inside the league office, panic set in. Multiple reports surfaced claiming Engelbert's own staff was divided. Some insiders described her management style as cold and detached, focused more on corporate deals than on the human side of the sport. Others said she ignored the advice of her own communications team and insisted on handling the crisis herself. What was once described as a tight ship was now leaking from every side. Meanwhile, the WNBPA, the players' union, began strategizing behind the scenes. Leaders held emergency calls discussing how to address the growing rift. There were talks of demanding formal accountability, even calls for Engelbert to step down. The union knew they had public opinion on their side, and they weren't going to waste it. The league, they argued, had lost its moral compass, and if Engelbert wouldn't change, they'd force the issue. At this point, the problem had grown far beyond one canceled meeting. The entire WNBA was at a breaking point. Players felt disrespected. Fans felt deceived. Sponsors were uneasy. Every attempt by Engelbert to pivot the conversation back to basketball failed, because the league's credibility was burning down around her. That's when whispers of NBA intervention began to circulate. Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner who oversees both leagues, was reportedly monitoring the situation closely. For months, he'd been quietly defending Engelbert as a capable business leader. But now, with the WNBA's reputation collapsing and the controversy dominating headlines, even he couldn't ignore the problem. Sources suggested that Silver was deeply concerned and had begun asking questions about the long-term impact of Engelbert's leadership. If true, that meant her job was officially in jeopardy. Silver's history with executive crises is well known. He acts quietly, but decisively. When league integrity is at stake, he doesn't wait for public opinion to settle. Insiders describe the NBA offices as tense but focused, with officials gathering reports about how the WNBA's internal communication had fallen apart. The fact that these evaluations were even happening told everyone one thing: change was coming. And as that realization spread, the movement Collier sparked gained unstoppable momentum. Players began uniting in ways the league hadn't seen in decades. From locker rooms to social media, messages of solidarity echoed everywhere. Even players who had never publicly criticized leadership began hinting at frustration. The divide between Engelbert's office and her athletes had turned into an unbridgeable canyon. By the time the WNBA finals ended, Engelbert's future looked bleak. What was supposed to be a celebration of women's basketball excellence had become a public referendum on her leadership. The hashtags calling for her resignation were trending daily. ESPN analysts were openly debating whether she could survive another season, and former league executives began publicly suggesting that it might be time for new leadership. Engelbert tried to weather the storm with silence, hoping it would fade when the offseason arrived, but the silence only made things worse. To fans and players, it looked like arrogance, like she believed she could simply outlast the controversy. But the movement she was facing wasn't fueled by gossip or rumors. It was fueled by years of frustration and an athlete's demand for respect. For Napheesa Collier, what began as a canceled meeting had evolved into something far greater. Her refusal to sit down was the moment the WNBA stopped pretending everything was fine. She had sparked a conversation that no one, not even the commissioner, Gary, could silence. Caitlin Clark's support gave the cause legitimacy. Fan outrage gave it power, and the NBA's quiet watch gave it pressure. Together, they formed a perfect storm, one that no press release could contain. The WNBA now stands at a crossroads. The players have drawn their line in the sand, and the commissioner's future hangs by a thread. Whether Engelbert steps down or tries to hold on, one thing is certain: the league will never be the same again. What started as one woman's act of defiance has become a revolution for respect, truth, and accountability in women's sports. Napheesa Collier's courage has forced the league to face itself, and for the first time, the power truly belongs to the players. If you believe players like Napheesa Collier deserve to be heard and respected, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more WNBA updates, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Cathy Engelbert can survive this storm, or is it finally time for new leadership?